Welcome to The Explainer. You ever feel like you're just banging your head against a wall, using the same old approach to a problem and getting absolutely nowhere? Well, today we are ditching that single hammer. We're going to build an entire toolkit for your mind, a way to see things way more clearly and honestly make radically better decisions.
All right, here's how we're going to do this. First, we'll get into why our thinking even needs an upgrade in the first place. Then we'll get our hands dirty and build 3 specific toolkits, one for radical innovation, another for smart risk-taking, and a third for just getting more of the right things done. Finally, we'll wrap it all up with a simple checklist to make this a daily practice.
So let's talk about the core issue here. Most of us have a favorite tool, right? That one mental hammer we use for every single problem. And when all you have is a hammer, everything starts to look like a nail. That's what holds us back. The whole goal is to move from that one hammer to a full, loaded toolkit.
So what's the secret sauce? How do people at the top of their game tackle these massive, complicated problems? Here's the thing. It's not that they just think harder. It's that they think differently. They have a better system, a framework that lets them see a problem from all these different angles at once.
And that system has a name. It's what the legendary investor Charlie Munger calls a latticework of mental models. Now, what on earth does that mean? It's basically a mental toolbox. Imagine having different lenses you can swap out, one from physics, another from psychology, another from biology. When you start weaving them together, suddenly reality comes into focus in a much richer, more accurate way.
Munger himself really said it best with this quote. The quality of your thinking isn't some fixed thing you're born with. It's directly tied to how many useful models you've got in your head. And that's fantastic news, right? It means being a brilliant thinker isn't about some innate genius. It's something you can actively build, just by consciously collecting the right mental tools. Okay, let's get our hands dirty. Time to build our first toolkit. This one is all about radical innovation. It's for when you need to completely break free from the way things have always been done and come up with something truly original.
The first tool in this kit is a big one: first principles thinking. See, most of us reason by analogy. We look at what someone else did and we kind of copy it. First principles is the total opposite. You break a problem down to its most basic fundamental truths, the stuff you absolutely know is true. It's like instead of just using the Legos someone else built, you melt them all the way down to the raw plastic and then decide what to build from there.
So, it's a 3-step process. First, you've got to identify what you're just assuming to be true about a problem. Then comes the really hard work. You boil everything down to its fundamental truths, the things that are absolutely undeniable. And only then, once you have that clean foundation, can you start building totally new solutions from the ground up.
And this is not just some theory. This is exactly what Elon Musk did with SpaceX. Everyone just assumed rockets were insanely expensive, but he didn't. He went back to first principles. He asked, okay, what is a rocket literally made of? Aluminum alloys, titanium, copper. And when he added up the cost of those raw materials, it was only about 2% of a rocket's typical price tag. That's when he knew. The high cost wasn't a law of physics. It was just an assumption everyone was making.
Okay, tool number 2 in our innovation kit is called inversion. And it's so powerful because it's so simple. You just flip the problem on its head. Instead of asking, how do we achieve our goal? You ask, what could we do that would absolutely guarantee we fail? Then you just don't do those things.
So you can see how these two work together, right? It's an amazing 1-2 punch. First principles thinking gives you this incredible, fresh blueprint for building something new. But then inversion comes in and acts like your safety net. It helps you dodge all the dumb mistakes and obvious traps that would kill your brilliant idea before it even gets off the ground.
All right, on to our next toolkit. This one is all about making smarter bets. It's about strategic risk-taking. How can you see the future a little more clearly, understand the real consequences of your actions, and, just as importantly, know your own limits? Okay, this is a huge one. Let's talk about first-order versus second-order thinking. First-order thinking is easy. It's the immediate result. Let's lay people off to cut costs. Boom, problem solved, right? Well, not so fast. Second-order thinking is like playing chess. You have to ask, and then what? Okay, we cut costs, and then morale plummets. We lose all that knowledge, and innovation grinds to a halt. See the difference? It's about thinking through the whole chain reaction. But here's the catch with second-order thinking. To see those long-term consequences, you have to be brutally honest with yourself about what you actually know. And that brings us to our next tool, the circle of competence. It's all about knowing the difference between what you deeply understand and what you only kinda sorta know. And the most important part isn't how big your circle is. It's knowing exactly where that edge is. I love this quote from IBM's founder, Thomas Watson Sr. It just says it all. I'm no genius. I'm smart in spots, but I stay around those spots. That's it. It's not about being timid. It's about being strategic. It's about knowing where your home turf is and playing the game there where you have a real advantage.
So this is how these two models become your guardrails. Before you make any big move, you ask yourself this question. Am I operating inside my circle of competence enough to really see the second-order effects here? And you know what? An honest no to that question is maybe one of the most valuable answers you can have. It tells you to slow down, to go learn more, or to call someone who actually knows what they're talking about.
All right, last toolkit. This one is all about peak efficiency. But listen, this is not about working more hours or just hustling harder. No. This is about being smarter with your energy and focusing it where it's going to have the absolute biggest impact. And we have to start with a classic, the Pareto principle. You probably know it as the 80-20 rule. It's this wild but surprisingly consistent idea that for almost anything, roughly 80% of your results will come from just 20% of your efforts. The trick is finding that vital few and focusing on it. I mean, just look at that imbalance. That little 20% slice is doing almost all of the heavy lifting, driving 80% of the results. So your job becomes a strategic hunt. You have to find that potent 20% in your work and your life, and then pour your energy into that, instead of getting distracted by the other 80% that barely moves the needle. But you can't just focus on that 20% forever. And that's where our balancing tool comes in, the law of diminishing returns. This is the crucial reminder that after a certain point, putting in more effort just stops working as well. You get less and less back for each bit of effort you put in. You know, you study for 10 hours straight, and those last couple of hours are probably useless. That's diminishing returns in action. And this is the magic combination for real efficiency. The 80-20 rule tells you what to focus on, the highest leverage stuff. Then, the law of diminishing returns tells you when to stop. It's like your internal alarm bell that says, okay, you've gotten most of the juice out of this lemon, it's time to move on to the next high-impact thing. Okay, we've built 3 powerful toolkits, but how do you make this practical? How do you actually use them day to day? The key is to turn all these abstract models into a concrete, actionable checklist for your mind.
So forget about trying to memorize a bunch of definitions. Just start asking yourself these questions whenever you're facing a challenge. What are the fundamental truths here? And then what happens? What would guarantee failure? Where does 80% of the result come from? And am I really qualified to be making this call? This is how you put the Latticework into practice every single day.
And that's really the crucial point. Thinking better isn't a destination you just arrive at one day. It's a practice. It's about consciously applying these frameworks, asking better questions, and constantly expanding your mental toolkit. You now have the foundation, so the only question left is, what problem are you going to look at differently today?